In our media-driven world, SL2 Analyzing Media can have a big impact on how we view the items that we encounter on a day-to-day basis, from things that we see posted on Facebook to video footage that we see in the news, even to simple tweets that we see from our friends. All of these things exist in historical and social context that we should be aware of if we're going to interpret them in a manner that is beneficial to both us and to the world. The target for SL2 asks that you can do several things going up the different levels. At the one level, it simply asks that you can explain the purpose of information presented in diverse media and formats. And so by diverse media and formats, again, we're really looking at anything that's not the written word that we traditionally would think of, such as novels or essays or articles. We're really looking instead at video and images, and I would clump with that, as I mentioned earlier, small bits of text like Twitter, because they've taken on a life of their own. They're social media in today's age. At the 2 level, we can not only explain, we can analyze. At the 3 level, we can analyze and evaluate the motives behind the piece that we're looking at. And at the 4 level, we can analyze purpose and context and still evaluate. So we've got quite a few different actions that we'll need to do for this target, and we also need to talk about some of this terminology like purpose and context and motive. So our key terms that we'll be working with for this target. At the 1 level, we're explaining. So we're simply making clear or telling about the text that we happen to be looking at. No specific details here. Okay, and this is just you basically giving your opinion with no support. And then at the 2 level, you're getting into analysis, and that means to break down parts of the text as we've seen on other targets, and that means you're going to have to give support. Okay. At the 3 and 4 level, you're also going to be adding the evaluation piece. And remember, to evaluate means to judge. So you're going to be determining whether or not something is effective or whether or not something is well used. Now we get into the what we're looking for. Purpose, you may remember from one of the reading targets, is why a text is created. That is just as true for media as it is for the written word. The motive is something new, and I would consider the motive to be the why behind the purpose. In other words, if a piece is intended to get us to vote a certain way, why is it that we're being asked to vote a certain way? Is it for religious reasons? Is it for personal gain? Is it for economic reasons? Is it something else? The context is the historical and social landscape of the text. And this is the 4-level indicator here. And this can be a challenge because not only do you need to understand what the text is trying to tell you, but you need to understand what was going on at the time that it was published and why that's important. So it does require a bit more knowledge about the text and the world around it. There are a few different types of motives that we should be aware of, and this is not an end-all and be-all list, but it's just something to get you started. There are 3 different types of motives overall. There's primary, social, and personal. And primary motives are very much based on just our needs as human beings. Hunger, thirst, sleep, avoidance of pain, that sort of need. And so I don't think you'll see a lot of this reflected in a text. These are more things that just are motives for our daily function in the world. Social and personal will be something you'll look more closely at, and especially that social piece. Some examples of social motives would be achievement or power, gaining power, curiosity, acquisitive, in other words, acquiring things, gathering material wealth, for example, would be an acquisitive social motive. This would also be where you'd put things like political and economic motive, religious motive, things that would relate to our social habits as human beings. Under the personal type of motive, you can consider your habits as an individual human. What are the things that you typically do? What are you hardwired to do? What are your individual goals? What are your attitudes? What are your interests? And so on. Now we're going to take a look at 3 examples today, and I tried to draw from a range of different types of media you might find on the internet. So this particular piece is a political ad from a few years back, I believe, between President Obama's first and second term in office. And you can see that this particular ad says almost 4 million fewer jobs, which is going to be a key here, than President Obama predicted. Okay. So again, we've got several different things we need to do. We need to analyze the purpose. Why does this particular text exist? And I think it's pretty clear here that whoever created this did not want us to vote for President Obama once again. If he is not providing the jobs that he said he'd get, we're suggesting that he's not doing his job. And we can also look to for the context piece here, some of this is provided for us. Like, we're getting a look into the time period. We're looking at a man who looks like he's been laid off. He appears sad and depressed. We're looking at a locked up warehouse where no jobs are occurring. If we also think back to that time period, we're still digging out of fall in our economy. And so this is a significant concern for many, many voters at the time period. And that makes this particular piece especially meaningful for the time. If we're going to evaluate the motives behind its presentation, so why did it exist? This one actually, I would say, does relate to some primary motives in the sense that we're playing on this guy here. If he doesn't have a job, how can he afford food? How can he afford shelter? How can he afford safety? Those are primary motives that are being played on here by the creators of this particular ad. From a social standpoint, this is certainly political in the sense that it's trying to sway us to vote one way or another. And as far as personal goes, not much to say. This is far more of a primary and a social motive piece. Is it being effectively done? Well, if you take a look at these images, I mean, we've got a sad-looking person chained to lock up, and then in this particular image of the president, he doesn't look very happy, and that doesn't necessarily encourage faith in his abilities. So I'd say the use of the media here actually fits the motive pretty well, trying to play on that primary concern for being able to feed one's family and the social concern of who should you vote for. Another example piece here, slightly different angle. This is an advertisement for a Porsche. Honestly now, did you spend your youth dreaming about someday owning a Nissan or a Mitsubishi? Why do I think this piece exists? Well, I think it's pretty clear here that this ad wants us to buy the Porsche. Look at that beautiful car. Who wouldn't want to do that? In the context, well, we are living in a land of luxury for some people. We are living in a very materialistic culture, and it's not uncommon to see high-end cars or really anything being pushed to consumers. The urge is to get these things to show our status. And that takes us into the motives behind this piece. This is social in the sense that we're talking about acquiring a car to show our status. It could also be achievement in that sense, that we would have this car to show that we have achieved great status and wealth and perhaps even power in the world. As far as personal goes, it could be related to one's personal interest. Perhaps you just like to have nice cars, or you like nice cars in general, or you like Porsche cars, you find them interesting. How well does this particular piece address these motives? Well, I'd say for the person who is interested in having nice things for whatever reason they may have, either they want to show off their status or they just like the car, this is pretty effective. We're playing on the concept of what you dreamed about for your youth. You know, young people tend to have big dreams. It can be hard to reach them, but we like to think about all the nice things that we could have if we're successful in life. And I think that play on your youthful dreams and coming true is a pretty powerful way to get to the purpose of buying that car. All right, final example is another political one, but I wanted to pull an example of Twitter here because I do think this is such an important part of the media that's out there today. So if we're talking about the purpose for this one, we need to look through the whole thing. And this came right after the election, so that's an important context here for us too. Retweet if you are a woman, an immigrant, LGBT, Muslim, African American, Latino, Latina, or in any other way completely terrified right now. And I believe that this was probably posted to get people to take action. President-elect Trump had just taken over or had been selected as our president-elect. What could we as a public do? We should be concerned. We should be making sure that rights aren't being violated, according to this particular person. So I'd say that's probably the purpose. Again, the context, this is right after a very heated election season and after a very hotly contested election itself, a very close one. People are very up in arms about the outcome of this particular election. And so looking at that context, we can see that this particular tweet is intended to really get a lot of people riled up. This person is referring to many different groups of people. As far as the motives go, we really have several at play here. From a primary perspective, this person clearly thinks that people should be fearful, and I would say that falls into the primary types of motives because we're talking about personal safety. And while I don't know that people would necessarily automatically think, oh, like physical harm could come to me, news has shown that that has in fact come true for some people. But I think more targeted by this particular tweet was the safety of your social status and your rights and what that could look like. From a social standpoint, very political. This person clearly wants people to do something about the fact that Trump became our president-elect, although the time had passed. And from a personal level, I wouldn't say necessarily into your habits or your interests. So this is primary and social motive. How well does it meet the motives? How well does it meet its purpose? Well, a wide group of people were talked about in this particular tweet, so I'd say that is pretty engaging, creating fear, truly, through that primary purpose. And because it came so quickly on the heels of the election, I'd say from a social standpoint, pretty effective as well.